For 50 years, Steven Spielberg has worked with Hollywood's biggest stars, forming partnerships that became unforgettable. But a few actors left him shocked, disappointed, and unwilling to ever try again. One actor arrived on set, carrying personal chaos that closed the door on any future work together. Another clashed with him over choices that quietly ended their partnership. And then there was the star, whose off-screen storm was so intense it broke the collaboration completely and left Spielberg done for good. What did these stars do to break Spielberg's trust? You'd be shocked to find out. Steven Spielberg's reputation. For decades, Steven Spielberg has been celebrated as the director who can move audiences to tears, keep them on the edge of their seats, and redefine what cinema can achieve. Yet even a legend like him is not immune to conflict. Behind the glowing reviews and billion-dollar grosses, Spielberg has faced moments of tension, clashes with actors, and disagreements over scripts that have left him uninterested in working with certain actors ever again. Steven Spielberg's career began with a film that no one expected to change Hollywood. When Jaws came out in 1975, the entire industry had to adjust. The movie wasn't just a hit. It created the idea of the summer blockbuster. Studios watched the way audiences rushed to it, and suddenly the rules for releasing movies shifted. Spielberg became the director who could reshape the business without intending to. He built on that momentum with an unusual amount of confidence. Only 2 years after Jaws, he released Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a film built around everyday people facing something extraordinary. Then there was Raiders of the Lost Ark, giving adventure movies a fresh energy that audiences didn't know they were missing. These films made Spielberg the most consistently successful director of that era. By this point, studios saw him as someone who could deliver a hit almost every time. But the 1990s added another side to his career. In 1993, Schindler's List introduced his turn toward historical filmmaking. He spent years preparing the project, filming it in black and white, and focusing on real accounts. The film won Best Picture and earned him his first Academy Award for Best Director. A few years later, he won again for Saving Private Ryan, known for its intense depiction of the D-Day landing. In 1994, Spielberg took an even bigger step when he joined Jeffrey Katzenberg and David Geffen to start DreamWorks SKG. It was rare for a new studio to appear at that time, and DreamWorks quickly became a major player. The studio worked across animation, drama, comedy, and large-scale productions. Spielberg wasn't just directing movies anymore. He was helping create a space where other filmmakers could build their own projects. But even with all his success, not every film avoided criticism. Amistad faced challenges from historians who questioned certain portrayals. Munich sparked debates among political groups who disagreed with its framing of sensitive events. And throughout his career, a few casting choices and portrayals of certain communities also brought pushback. These reactions were part of the conversation around his work. But thankfully, none developed into major scandals. Alongside his directing career, Spielberg received countless honors. The AFI Life Achievement Award was awarded to him in 1995. The Kennedy Center Honors followed in 2006. And over the decades, he collected awards from film institutions around the world. These awards weren't tied to single movies. They recognized the impact of his entire body of work and his influence on the industry. When it comes to his reputation in the industry, people who worked with him often described a director who kept his sets organized and steady. He liked things clear. He liked people prepared. He wasn't known for exploding during production or creating tension for the sake of it. His workdays typically ran smoothly, and his longtime collaborators often returned for more projects because the environment was predictable and focused. But at the same time, Spielberg was known to pay close attention to how actors and crew members handled themselves. And while he didn't raise public complaints, he made mental notes. When a collaboration went well, he brought the person back. When it didn't, he simply didn't repeat the partnership. There was no announcement or public explanation, just a shift in who he worked with from one film to the next. Because of this, Spielberg rarely had high-profile fallouts. Most actors and directors who worked with him spoke about the experience in positive terms. He wasn't known for feuds, dramatic conflicts, or open disagreements. For someone with such a massive career, he avoided trouble more than most. But some actors crossed a line with Spielberg, enough for him to cut professional ties completely. Tom Cruise was one of them. Their partnership seemed solid. Their film together was a success, and at the time, nothing suggested there would be a problem. But something happened during the promotion of War of the Worlds in 2005 that Spielberg couldn't ignore. Sadly, this controversial incident created a rift that ruined their chances of working together again. The Tom Cruise feud. When Tom Cruise and Steven Spielberg first teamed up in 2002, the pairing felt almost perfect. Cruise was one of the world's biggest stars, and Spielberg was the director whose name alone could turn a movie into an event. Their first collaboration, Minority Report, proved exactly why the industry had been waiting for the two to join forces. The film delivered a mix of action, tension, and futuristic world-building that critics praised almost instantly. Reviewers highlighted Cruise's tight, controlled performance and Spielberg's sharp direction, and audiences responded the same way. The movie earned around $358 million worldwide, and behind the scenes, Spielberg talked openly about how impressed he was with Cruise's focus and discipline. For both of them, it seemed like the start of a partnership they would return to often. 3 years later, they reunited for War of the Worlds, a darker, more intense adaptation of the classic H.G. Wells novel. The production went smoothly. Tom Cruise arrived prepared. Spielberg kept the schedule tight. There were no rumors of tension, no delays, and no disagreements big enough to attract attention. Everything pointed toward another major hit. And when the film reached theaters, the response was strong. But this time, the conversation around the movie didn't stay on the movie for long. During the promotion for War of the Worlds, Cruise's public behavior shifted sharply, in a way that took over the cultural conversation almost overnight. The moment that drew the most attention was his appearance on The Oprah Winfrey Show, where he jumped onto Oprah's couch repeatedly while talking about his relationship with Katie Holmes. The clip spread immediately, and instead of being treated like an excited expression of love, it became a punchline across television and magazines. Late-night hosts replayed it, tabloids ran it on their covers, and audiences started focusing on Cruise's personal life more than anything connected to the movie. Not long after, another controversy followed. Cruise criticized actress Brooke Shields for using antidepressants to treat postpartum depression, which led to public backlash. Mental health groups condemned the comments, and Shields responded publicly. The story became yet another distraction, pulling more attention away from the movie he was supposed to be promoting. Perhaps the most controversial comment came during an interview with Matt Lauer on The Today Show, where Cruise pushed back aggressively on the topic of psychiatry and medication, creating one of his most contentious on-air moments. Clips from that interview ran everywhere. By this point, every part of the War of the Worlds press cycle had been overshadowed. Instead of discussing the special effects, the performances, or the story, the media focused almost entirely on Cruise's behavior and his outspoken views. Inside the production team, frustration began to build, and Spielberg was reportedly at the center of it. After 2 smooth collaborations and years of mutual respect, he didn't expect the promotional run to derail so quickly. According to multiple reports at the time, he was angry that Cruise's actions had pulled attention away from the film they had worked so hard to complete. Some insiders claimed Spielberg believed the controversies cost the film around $30 million in potential revenue because families avoided theaters amid the non-stop headlines. But the disappointment wasn't about drama. It was about timing. The entire conversation around the movie had shifted, and Spielberg was left feeling that the work on screen was being drowned out. Once the promotion ended, Spielberg quietly stepped back. He didn't speak publicly about the issue, but he didn't pursue future collaborations either. For someone who often returned to actors he trusted, the silence spoke clearly. There were no more joint projects, no new discussions, and no follow-up films. The partnership that once looked promising disappeared almost instantly. The media responded quickly to the shift. Tabloids stayed focused on Cruise's personal life, often pushing the film itself to the background. Industry watchers noted that Spielberg rarely cut ties in such an obvious way. His career was filled with long-standing professional relationships, so the sudden distance was noticeable. Around the same time, Paramount Pictures reevaluated its partnership with Cruise's production company. Studio head Sumner Redstone eventually announced that their deal was ending, pointing directly to Cruise's off-screen behavior as the reason. The decision signaled how sharply the industry reacted to the period's controversies. Cruise's career entered a rough patch soon after. Several of his releases in the following years earned less than expected, and some studios backed away from high-risk projects that relied heavily on his name. The combination of the backlash, shifting public perception, and the loss of major studio support created one of the toughest stretches of his career. Meanwhile, Spielberg kept moving forward with new projects, releasing films such as Munich, Lincoln, and Ready Player One, all of which extended his directing career into new subjects and new eras. For years, the distance between the two men remained. They didn't criticize each other publicly, but they also didn't work together again. Their names never appeared on the same project, and interviews about their past collaborations stayed brief and careful. The industry assumed the split was permanent. Then, nearly 2 decades later, something unexpected happened. At the 2023 Oscar nominees luncheon, Spielberg and Cruise crossed paths again, and for the first time in years, their interaction was openly friendly. Spielberg congratulated Cruise on the success of Top Gun: Maverick and told him, "You saved Hollywood, and you might have saved theatrical distribution." The moment was widely shared because it suggested that whatever tension existed between them had finally settled. It wasn't framed as a reunion or a dramatic reconciliation, just two major figures acknowledging each other after a long silence. The comments didn't erase the history between them, but they showed the distance may have finally softened. And after nearly 20 years of separation, even that small moment stood out. But the Cruise fallout wasn't the only moment when a major star pulled Spielberg into unexpected trouble. Not long before that, Julia Roberts had tested his patience in a way that became one of the most talked about behind-the-scenes problems of his career: the Julia Roberts controversy. When Hook went into production in the early 1990s, Steven Spielberg was entering one of the strongest periods of his career. He had just come off Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, another major hit in a franchise that had already become a cultural landmark. Audiences saw him as a director who could deliver blockbuster adventures with ease, and studios trusted him with some of their biggest projects. Spielberg had power, stability, and a long string of successes behind him. At the same time, Julia Roberts was becoming one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. After Pretty Woman exploded in 1990, she became the industry's new favorite star. She drew audiences in, she had a bright public image, and every studio wanted her name attached to their next film. Reporters followed her everywhere, and tabloids covered her relationships as closely as they covered her career. She was rising quickly, and by the time the casting announcements for Hook were made, she was already considered America's sweetheart. Casting her as Tinkerbell seemed like a natural match. The film was bringing together Robin Williams as Peter Pan and Dustin Hoffman as Captain Hook, giving the production 3 of the biggest names in Hollywood at the time. Spielberg wanted the film to feel magical and large-scale, and adding Roberts to the cast seemed like the perfect way to complete that picture. Fans were excited, the studio was confident, and the film began production with a strong sense of momentum. But around the same time filming began, Roberts' personal life shifted in a way that immediately drew massive press attention. She had been in a very public relationship with actor Kiefer Sutherland, and the two were considered one of Hollywood's most watched couples. Their breakup, however, was sudden and messy, and the tabloids published new rumors every day. Reporters claimed Sutherland had been unfaithful. Others said Roberts had walked out days before their planned wedding. None of the stories were quiet, and none of them left Roberts with space to escape the attention. Unfortunately, the breakup happened at the same moment Hook was filming. And so, Roberts arrived on set, carrying the weight of constant media coverage, and the paparazzi followed her everywhere. Instead of focusing on the film, the press centered their coverage almost entirely on her personal turmoil. Entertainment magazines ran her name on the front page weekly, sometimes even daily. For a production as large as Hook, the distraction quickly became impossible to ignore. But that wasn't the main challenge, because as filming continued, tension reportedly grew behind the scenes. Spielberg later admitted publicly that Roberts was difficult to work with during the shoot. Crew members claimed she arrived late to set on several occasions, and people working behind the camera described her moods as unpredictable. These reports led to the nickname Tinker Hell, a label that followed her for years and became one of the most repeated stories connected to the film. But nearly everyone involved agreed that the pressure from the press, combined with her very public breakup, created a stressful environment around her performance. Spielberg grew frustrated by the situation. He was working with a tight schedule, a large cast, and a high-budget production that required careful coordination. When delays happened, they affected hundreds of people working on the film. Spielberg later admitted that he felt Roberts' personal problems were interfering with the movie. In later interviews, when asked about the one actor he wouldn't want to work with ever again, he named Julia, saying it was a difficult time for them to be working together due to the emotional stress she was dealing with. For Spielberg, those comments were unusual. Throughout his career, he rarely criticized actors openly, even when productions were challenging. Because of that, his remarks stood out immediately, making it clear that whatever had happened on set had pushed him past the point of keeping it private. After Hook, he never cast Roberts in another one of his films. Even as years passed and both of their careers continued to grow, the two did not collaborate again. But after Spielberg's interview, Roberts addressed the situation herself. She acknowledged that she had been going through an extremely difficult time during the filming of Hook. She admitted she had not been in the best emotional place and that the breakup had been overwhelming, but she pushed back hard against the Tinker Hell nickname, saying the stories had been exaggerated and that the tabloids had turned small moments into major scandals. She argued that the coverage was unfair and that it painted a version of events that didn't match how she saw herself at that time. Pointing to Spielberg's interview in particular, she said, "Hand to God, not a thing I read about that was truthful, and it really hurt my feelings. Because not only did it make me sound mean, but it was a situation where people who knew the truth talked about it in a way that wasn't untruthful. I saw that, and my eyes popped out of my head. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this person that I knew and trusted was actually hesitating to come to my defense. It was a hard lesson to learn. It was the first time that I felt I had a turncoat in my midst." Crew members, however, told a different story. Some said they had direct experiences with Roberts that left them frustrated. Others said the nickname grew naturally because the environment was genuinely stressful. Their reports didn't always match Roberts' explanations, and for many years the details remained unclear, shaped by conflicting accounts and memories from people on opposite sides of the situation. Tabloids took full advantage of the feud, and throughout the early 1990s, magazines ran stories about Roberts' breakup, her emotional state, and her alleged behavior on set. They published interviews, leaks, and behind-the-scenes rumors that kept the feud alive far longer than the film's publicity run. Fans of Roberts defended her, fans of Spielberg defended him, and because both were major stars, the story never faded completely. Hollywood insiders paid attention to the divide because of who was involved, and the scandal created a reputation for Hook that followed the film for years, overshadowing parts of the production that had nothing to do with Roberts or her personal life. Despite the feud, Julia Roberts' career continued to grow. She starred in major films throughout the 90s and early 2000s, including My Best Friend's Wedding, Notting Hill, and Runaway Bride. In 2000, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for her performance in Erin Brockovich, solidifying her place as one of Hollywood's biggest and most enduring stars. Whatever happened during Hook never slowed her down professionally. Spielberg's career also moved forward without interruption. Only 2 years after Hook, he released Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, both in 1993. One became one of the biggest blockbusters of all time, and the other won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Spielberg entered a new era of influence, and his career remained steady through animated films, historical dramas, and science fiction projects. Years passed, and the feud between Spielberg and Roberts became part of Hollywood's long list of behind-the-scenes stories, the kind that fans discuss occasionally but never fully resolve. Even today, it remains one of the few times Spielberg publicly addressed conflict with an actor. And because of that, the story continues to echo whenever anyone talks about difficult productions or unexpected clashes between major stars. But Julia Roberts isn't the only Hollywood actor that Spielberg never worked with again. Long before the tabloids cared about celebrity feuds, one actor, Dennis Weaver, turned down Steven Spielberg in a way he never forgot. The Dennis Weaver fallout. Long before Spielberg was working with global superstars or directing some of the most successful films ever made, he built a small but powerful reputation through television. And the project that truly put him on the map was Duel in 1971. It was a TV movie about an ordinary man hunted by a mysterious truck driver, and it starred Dennis Weaver, an actor who had already built a career through series like Gunsmoke and McCloud. Weaver carried the entire story almost alone, spending most of the film reacting to danger with no other characters to play against. The performance was intense and grounded, and it helped the film stand out far beyond what anyone expected for a television thriller. Duel became a surprise hit and turned Spielberg into someone the industry suddenly wanted to watch. Critics praised his direction, and producers realized he had a sharp eye for suspense. For Weaver, the project was also a major moment. It showed that he could lead a film on his own, and his work with Spielberg created a sense that the two might collaborate again in the future. Most of the time, when an actor and director connect that early and that successfully, it leads to more work together. Spielberg especially was known for repeating collaborations as his career grew. He worked with many actors multiple times, often building long-term partnerships that lasted decades. Because of that, the next step in the relationship between Spielberg and Weaver seemed simple. When Spielberg began preparing his big World War II comedy, 1941, in the late 1970s, he reached out to Weaver with a role because it made sense to bring back someone he trusted. Weaver found the offer particularly juicy because it came from a director whose career was rising quickly. By 1979, Spielberg had already directed Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He was no longer the up-and-coming television director. He was one of the most sought-after filmmakers in Hollywood. But when Weaver read the script for 1941, the reaction wasn't what Spielberg expected. Weaver didn't think the material worked, and he didn't hide his feelings. He told Spielberg directly that he didn't find the script funny. The tone, the jokes, and the pacing didn't land for him. He also took issue with some of the scenes involving nudity, which he felt were unnecessary and didn't add anything to the story. He wasn't comfortable with the direction the film was taking, and he made that clear from the start. Spielberg reportedly understood his concerns and tried to address them. During their conversations, he even joked that his own mother would be embarrassed if he filmed the script exactly as written. Spielberg told Weaver that changes would be made and that the final version wouldn't include the things he objected to. With that assurance, Weaver waited to see the revised script. But when the updates arrived, nothing important had shifted. The scenes Weaver objected to were still there. The jokes he thought didn't work were still written the same way. The tone still didn't feel right to him. It was essentially the same script he had already turned down. After reading the revisions, Weaver made his final choice. He declined the role, and he stepped away from the project entirely. From Weaver's perspective, he wasn't rejecting Spielberg, he was rejecting a script he didn't believe in. But from Spielberg's side, the decision reportedly marked a sharp turn in their working relationship. He had expected Weaver to return, especially because their first collaboration had been so successful. Spielberg often built long-term professional relationships, and the breakup of one of his earliest actor partnerships stood out immediately. The fallout wasn't dramatic or public, but it was clear. After Duel, the two never worked together again. Spielberg went on to create some of the biggest films of the next 50 years, while Weaver continued acting in television and film, building a long career of his own. But their paths never crossed professionally again. The split became one of the earliest examples of a Spielberg collaboration that didn't continue, even though the first project between them had been one of the most impactful moments of Spielberg's early career. Within Hollywood, the Weaver refusal became a controversial yet memorable story. While it didn't turn into a full-blown scandal, it was unusual. Another reason why the situation gained attention was because of the contrast between the two projects. Duel is considered one of Spielberg's strongest early works, a film many directors look back on for its clever simplicity and tension. Some even refer to it as a blueprint for Spielberg's later suspense style. And yet, the star of that film turned down an opportunity to be in a major studio project directed by the same man years later. The outcome created an irony Hollywood didn't miss. The success of their first project didn't lead to anything beyond that one film. Meanwhile, 1941 itself had a complicated journey. Despite Spielberg's confidence and a large cast that included John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, the film received mixed reviews and didn't perform as strongly as expected. Some felt it was too chaotic, too loud, or too unfocused. Others believed the comedy didn't connect with audiences. It wasn't a failure, but it wasn't a classic either. For Weaver, this confirmed his instincts about the script. The movie he originally hesitated about ended up dividing critics and audiences. Years later, Spielberg rarely spoke about the disagreement. He didn't criticize Weaver publicly, and he didn't revisit the details often. But the absence of further collaboration told the story clearly. In an industry where Spielberg consistently returned to people he trusted, this early split stood out as one of the few times when a partnership that began strong ended quietly. For Dennis Weaver, the moment became a footnote in a long career. He continued acting, appearing in television movies, dramas, and occasional features. Although Duel remained one of his most recognized performances, the opportunity to work again with Spielberg simply never came back around. And for Spielberg, the Weaver split became part of the pattern that shaped the rest of his career. When a production experience didn't feel right, he rarely repeated it. He didn't argue publicly, and he didn't hold grudges out loud, but he carried the memory of how each collaboration went. Which of these actors would you want Steven Spielberg to give a second chance? Let us know what you think in the comments, and if you want more stories like this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update.